Okay, we will
10,
continue our webinar. We have our
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Okay.
Two.
Okay, we
we
are ready.
continue the.
Okay, we are ready. Really, our meeting in YouTube for very huge participants, and we have a guest speakers versus Dr. Nrily Nurlaili, MED, the Education and Cultural Atas sa Indonesian Embassy in Manila, Philippines. The second speaker is Professor Arminda Santiago, PhD, Dean of the College of the MASCOM, University of the Philippines, Diliman. And our third author is Associate Professor Dr. Nur Hassana Abdullah from the Faculty of Technology Management and Business, University Tun Hussein on Malaysia. And let me inform you that the Q&A session will be host after all the speaker session, and you can type the question in the chat room in the Zoom and also in the chat room in the YouTube. We will select it to choose the question in the both of our media, the Zoom and Zoom and YouTube. And for the attendance list, you can check. You can chat in the chat room of Zoom and also in the YouTube for the certificate purpose. And before we starting our session, first of all, please Mr. Jovi to play the company profile about the Dr. Sutomo University, so you know that what is our university as a host.
There is no audio.
There's no sound. No sound.
Yeah, no sound.
Countries. Since Unitomo was established in 1981, always upholds its commitment as a national and popular campus, which is open to all groups and segments of society.
Unitomo has more than 40,000 alumni that spread around all parts of Indonesia, even around the globe, and enter the professional industry. Students at Unitomo come from different parts of Indonesia and foreign countries with different background of family, ethnic, race and religion. They come here not only just to continue their study and get the title, but also to get their dreams come true. At Unitomo, there is more than a mission. It is our commitment to our students to get a better future.
The campus of Unitomo in Semolowaru, Surabaya is located in the Education Park complex of Dr. Sutomo, side by side with Dr. Sutomo Junior High School, Dr. Sutomo Senior High School, and Unitomo Vocational School, who are equally under the auspices of the legal entity of Cendekia Utama Education Foundation. In this beautiful and well-organized campus complex, a number of academic and non-academic facilities are available. 4- and 5-story lecture buildings that are equipped with air-conditioned and LCD projectors in each class. Library with a complete and up-to-date collection of books. Wi-Fi area that reaches almost all corners of the campus. Auditorium with a capacity of 400 people and seminar room equipped with video conference facilities, as well as a number of sport facilities to support student activities such as basketball, futsal, wall climbing, and many others. Unitomo currently fosters more than 8,000 students. Besides having face-to-face lectures in classrooms, they can also attend online lectures through the e-learning program that is the mainstay of this campus. Known as a dynamic campus, Unitomo is very supportive of students to take part in various activities in order to develop their talents and potential. No wonder various achievements were achieved at the local, regional, national, and even international level. Unitomo is currently supported by around 300 qualified masters, doctoral lecturers, and a number of professors. They are spread across 9 faculties. Faculty of Administration Science, Faculty of Agriculture, Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Faculty of Economics and Business, Faculty of Engineering, Faculty of Letters, Faculty of Communication Science, Faculty of Law, Faculty of Health Science. With the commitment to always provide the best education for all groups and segments of society, Unitomo is ready to take a role in building a better Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Sir Jovi, for the company profile, and please unmute all. Please mute all. Okay. And we go to the next session about the speech by the Dr. May Tiana Indrasari, the Vice President of the Dr. Sutomo University. Dr. May, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Daniel. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bapak Ibu, hari ini adalah hari lahirnya Pancasila. Mungkin saya sedikit out of the box gitu dari topik, karena saya yakin 3 narasumber kita ini adalah orang-orang yang sangat berkompeten, baik mengenai kebijakan-kebijakan untuk international collaboration oleh Bunda Lili, kemudian mengenai research collaboration Prof. Santiago, dan juga untuk kolaborasi penulisan buku oleh asisten Profesor Nur dari UTHM. Mereka adalah wanita-wanita hebat yang akan sharing knowledge. Kemudian sengaja di acara ini kita menggunakan dual language gitu ya, dual bahasa antara bahasa Inggris dan bahasa Indonesia. Untuk Prof. Santiago dan Prof. Nur memang sudah terbiasa menggunakan bahasa Inggris. Kemudian saya secara khusus meminta kepada Bu Lili untuk bisa mensosialisasikan mengenai kebijakan-kebijakan untuk internasional kolaborasi yang ada di Manila dalam bahasa Indonesia. Karena peserta cukup banyak dari bahasa Indonesia dan kita support kampus Merdeka perlu benar-benar paham tentang ini. Jadi supaya jangan ada miss gitu. Karena kalau kita pakai bahasa Inggris itu terkadang masih ada miss-nya gitu ya. Mohon maaf sebelumnya, jadi kita menggunakan 2 bahasa. Oke, kemudian harapan dari semua kegiatan ini adalah sedikit meresapi makna lahirnya Pancasila. Selanjutnya saya ingin sedikit memperkenalkan bagaimana itu sejarah hari lahirnya Pancasila in English. The commemoration of the Pancasila's birthday on June 1st, 2020 was tinged with a heartbreaking nationalism. Due to the ferocity of the COVID-19 pandemic, even so, the values of Pancasila must remain a guideline to overcome the multidimensional crisis that has been shown before our eyes. Pancasila, which has established as the basis of the state, is a big vision that has worldwide. Visionary leadership is indeed leadership that has a character full of imagination and a reliable executor. This country is formulating a new normality phase for various community activities. The provisions and procedures regarding the new normal must be accordance with all precepts of the Pancasila. New normalities need a lot of imagination that can open up various social and technological innovation. According to Pancasila Digger, imagination is the key to the nation's progress. In fact, the value of Pancasila are spark of Sukarno's reflection under the breadfruit tree. When he was undergoing exile by the invaders, the history of the birth of Pancasila is very much attached to the dialectics of the struggle and the great vision of Bung Karno. God has blessed Sukarno with intellectual intelligence and exceptional language skill. His brain capacity is able to capture local and global message at the time, then restate with a dynamic and innovative concept of populist thought. In the context of the new normal, Pancasila values are expected to produce authentic leaders in various fields. The new era of normal needs more authentic leadership, both government and also business leadership. According to Professor Bill George of Harvard University, authentic leadership is formed by dialectics and locality-based struggle. In Bung Karno teachings, authentic leaders must be able to accelerate national value that are adapted to the progress of the era, namely mutual cooperation. Mutual cooperation, according to Sukarno, was joint bond reinforcement, brain squeezing, and perspiration together. A struggle for mutual assistance, the essence of actually the genuine way of Indonesia. It also can be called the Indonesian way. Under the breadfruit tree, he imagined, formulate, and foundation of the country towards the land of hope of the university. Sukarno was a person whose soul was densely packed with art and culture and had extraordinary imagination. The new normal requires the nation imagination and creativity. A digital culture platform is needed so that the creative process and design for the creative industries can run smoothly in the new normal. To pump the nation imagination and energy innovation to meet a new normal, fellow countrymen and all, have a great heart, have imagination, dig it up, work, dig it up, work. We are in our homeland, in the most beautiful one in the world. The first President of Republic of Indonesia, Insinyur Soekarno in Semarang, July 29, 1956. Untuk memompa daya imajinasi dan energi inovasi bangsa menyongsong era kenormalan baru, kita kumandangkan lagi cuplikan pidato Bung Karno. Saudara-saudara sebangsa setanah air, berjiwa besarlah, berimagination, gali, bekerja, gali, bekerja. Kita adalah satu tanah air yang paling cantik di dunia. By the name of Allah, let's open the international webinar today. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wabillahi taufiq walhidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Wing, for the inspiring speech. And before we start our session, we will start our webinar with the prayer led by the Bapak Didi. We will pray for the safe and the guidance for us during this COVID-19. Bapak Didi, time is yours. Pak Didi.
Ayo guys. Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hamdan yuafi ni'amahu wa yukafi mazidah. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu. Kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhi sultanik. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Ya Allah, Tuhan yang Maha Agung, Tuhan yang Maha Besar, segala puji dan puji bagimu ya Allah, Tuhan seluruh sekalian alam. Pada siang hari ini, kita bersyukur bahwa kita bisa melaksanakan international webinar Challenge and Opportunity on Research and International Collaboration yang dikomandani Dr. Sutomo University. Ya Allah, limpahkanlah kasih sayang-Mu, berikanlah rahmat-Mu, agar international webinar ini bermanfaat bagi kita semua, dan khususnya bagi teman-teman perguruan tinggi di antara perkumpulan ini. Ya Allah, Tuhan yang Maha Agung dan Tuhan yang Maha Bijaksana, limpahkan karunia-Mu, limpahkan kasih sayang-Mu, agar seminar ini atau webinar internasional ini bermanfaat bagi kita semua. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzabannar wa adkhilnal jannata ma'al Qur'an wa adkhilnal jannata ma'al abrar ya aziz ya ghafar ya rabbal alamin. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Bapak Didi, for the opening prayer. And we will start our session with the first session conducted by the Dr. Lili Nurlaili, the Education and Culture Attaché in Indonesia Embassy in Manila, Philippines. The session will be conducted in Bahasa Indonesia with the title Strategi Kolaborasi Pendidikan, Pelatihan, dan Pemagangan di Filipina, or in English, the Strategy for the Education, Collaboration, Training, and the Internship in the Philippines. The Dr. Lili Nurlaili served as an Education and Culture Attaché in Indonesia Embassy in Manila. She's have a bachelor degree in Education and Civic and Law in the Institut Keguruan and Ilmu Pendidikan Jakarta. She reached the MA in the Social Science in Curtin University, Australia, and also doctoral in the Education Management in the Universitas Negeri Jakarta. Since May 2017, she served as Education and Culture Attaché in the Indonesian Embassy in Manila. For the Dr. Lili Nurlaili, Ibu, time is yours.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi semuanya. Magandang umaga yang saya hormati. Magandang umaga po. Yang saya hormati Ibu Mutia, yang saya hormati panitia, my honorable the speaker from University of Philippines and then University Malaysia. Okay, my name is Lili Nurlaili. I'm Attaché Education Indonesian Embassy in Manila from 2017. Maybe this year, 2020, in the last my duty, because Attaché Education only 3.5 years. Karena saya akan menjelaskan tentang kerjasama apa saja yang bisa dilakukan di Filipina, saya akan menggunakan bahasa Indonesia karena para pendengar ataupun yang melihat seminar ini mayoritas adalah mahasiswa ataupun dosen yang akan melakukan kerjasama atau penelitian di Manila. Baik, judul dari kegiatan saya ini atau judul dari pembahasan saya ini adalah tentang program kerjasama luar negeri, pendidikan, kebudayaan, penelitian, dan juga magang di Filipina. Mohon slide-nya ditayangkan. Oke. Ya, ini adalah program-program yang ada di Attaché Pendidikan dan Kebudayaan di Filipina. Baik, alamat kantornya adalah di Salcedo, Legazpi Village, Makati City. Next. Jadi seluruh attaché yang ada di seluruh dunia, jadi attaché pendidikan dan kebudayaan ada di 16 negara, salah satunya adalah di Filipina, memiliki peran strategis di dalam bidang pendidikan dan kebudayaan di luar negeri. Pertama adalah peningkatan kerjasama. Kerjasama apa? Kerjasama dalam segala bidang. Karena kita sebagai attaché pendidikan harus melakukan kerjasama bukan hanya tingkat perguruan tinggi, tapi juga mulai dari pendidikan, yaitu di taman kanak-kanak, sekolah dasar, sekolah menengah pertama, sekolah menengah atas, sampai dengan perguruan tinggi. Kerjasama antara Indonesia dengan Filipina, tahun lalu kita sudah rayakan 70 tahun kerjasama. Artinya sudah 70 tahun kerjasama yang baik antara pemerintah Indonesia dengan pemerintah Filipina dalam segala bidang. Dan tahun ini adalah tahun ke-71. Dan masih terus berlanjut lagi dan berlanjut lagi. Peningkatan kerjasamanya ini akan saya jelaskan nanti. Berikutnya adalah pengembangan bahasa dan budaya. Nah, sebagai attaché pendidikan dan kebudayaan, saya mengembangkan bahasa yaitu bahasa Indonesia. Pada saat pertama saya datang di Filipina tahun 2017, yang mengikuti bahasa Indonesia hanya 20 orang. Dan itu pun hanya dari 2 universitas, yaitu 10 orang dari Ateneo dan 10 orang dari Philippine Women University, PWU. Kemudian setelah 6 bulan saya berada di sana, maka mulai meningkat mahasiswa-mahasiswa, pelajar, ataupun masyarakat, guru, dosen yang mau atau berminat untuk mengikuti bahasa Indonesia. Dan akhirnya saat ini ada sekitar 750 siswa, guru, dosen, masyarakat yang terlibat dan sangat berperan aktif dalam mengikuti bahasa Indonesia gratis yang disiapkan atau disediakan guru-gurunya oleh Badan Bahasa dari Indonesia, dan kemudian tempatnya ada di berbagai lokasi. Misalnya di KBRI Manila, kita mempunyai kelas bahasa Indonesia yaitu pagi, siang, dan sore hari. Kemudian kita mempunyai kelas di 15 universitas, serta ada 5 sekolah SMA yang juga terlibat. Yang paling banyak murid kami bahasa Indonesia adalah dari PUP, Philippine Polytechnic University of Philippines, lebih dari 200 orang. Kemudian kita juga punya kelas bahasa Indonesia di UP Diliman, di PWU, Ateneo dan PWU sudah menjadi mata pelajaran wajib yang harus diambil bagi mahasiswanya dan ada angka kreditnya. Kemudian kerjasama dalam bidang budaya. Pada saat saya datang di 2017, maka kegiatan-kegiatan saya awali dengan memperkenalkan kebudayaan-kebudayaan yang ada di Indonesia. Kemudian saya tampilkan tarian-tarian yang ada di Indonesia pada setiap acara-acara yang ada di Filipina. Misalnya saya datangi universitas dan saya datangkan penari, misalnya tarian Bali, tarian Padang, tarian Aceh, dan sebagainya. Dan kemudian sejak tahun 2018 saya mengajarkan memperkenalkan membatik, yaitu membuat batik kepada masyarakat di Filipina. Mengapa saya mengajarkan batik? Karena batik adalah sudah diakui di seluruh dunia dan diakui oleh PBB bahwa itu adalah milik bangsa Indonesia. Dan kemudian sampai saat ini saya sudah mengajarkan lebih dari 5.000 orang Filipin untuk belajar membatik. Adapun strategi yang saya lakukan adalah saya berkeliling dari universitas ke universitas, membawa peralatan semuanya, mulai dari bahan morinya, kemudian catnya, kemudian kompor, dan kemudian wax, serta membawa juga bahan-bahan lainnya. Saya berikan mereka gratis untuk belajar batik. Bukan karena apa-apa, tujuan saya adalah agar orang Filipina cinta kepada batik Indonesia. Dan hal itu terbukti setelah pelatihan yang saya lakukan 1 hari penuh dari pagi sampai sore sampai jadi batiknya, mereka rata-rata akhirnya menyadari betapa sulitnya membuat batik. Dan mereka menghargai batik Indonesia. Bahkan mereka kemudian membuat statement bahwa kalau nanti mereka ke Indonesia, mereka tidak akan menawar ketika akan membeli batik. Mengapa? Karena ternyata membuat batik itu sulit dan hasilnya sangat bagus sekali. Oleh karena itu, kegiatan ini terus saya lanjutkan agar semakin banyak orang Filipina cinta dan senang dengan produksi buatan Indonesia. Nomor 3, rekomendasi kebijakan dari hasil pengamatan penelitian. Jadi di sini ada beberapa kegiatan-kegiatan penelitian yang dilakukan baik oleh mahasiswa secara pribadi, secara grup, ataupun penelitian-penelitian yang dilakukan oleh organisasi-organisasi. Maka dibuat rekomendasi seperti apa yang akan dilakukan untuk berikutnya. Kegiatan apa, kerjasama apa yang bisa menghasilkan dalam bidang pengamatan dan penelitian tersebut. Berikutnya adalah pertemuan internasional dan tugas khusus lainnya. Jadi, saya mengundang kegiatan-kegiatan internasional, terutama adalah di Filipina. Filipina adalah terkenal dengan sekolah nursingnya. Maka saya mengundang dosen-dosen, mahasiswa yang akan belajar tentang keperawatan di Filipina. Kemudian saya juga membawa dosen-dosen keperawatan ke Indonesia untuk memberikan pengarahan, untuk memberikan pelatihan, ataupun bagaimana caranya mengikuti ujian-ujian internasional keperawatan. Sehingga mereka akan mampu untuk menjadi perawat-perawat yang handal di luar negeri. Karena untuk ikut menjadi perawat di luar negeri harus mengikuti ujian yang cukup rumit, yang cukup sulit. Paling utama, kesulitan yang mereka hadapi adalah bahasa Inggris, karena ujiannya menggunakan bahasa Inggris. Maka saya bekerja sama dengan Top Rank mensosialisasikan seperti apa sih ujian keperawatan internasional NCLEX tersebut, AHAD maupun yang lainnya. Berikutnya, pertemuan internasional juga saya mengadakan University Fair tahun 2018, yaitu mengundang universitas-universitas untuk mempromosikan kampus-kampus mereka di Filipina. Alhamdulillah pada saat itu ya seminar ataupun University Fair yang saya lakukan selama 2 hari yang diikuti sekitar 20 universitas dari Indonesia banyak sekali yang hadir. Dan kemudian banyak sekali yang berminat dan melakukan kerjasama dengan para universitas yang hadir pada saat itu. Kegiatan itu didukung pula oleh CHED, Commission Higher Education dari Filipina, serta dari DepEd, Department of Education, dan juga dari TESDA, Technical Skill Development Authority. Berikutnya pembinaan masyarakat, pelajar, karya siswa, dan mahasiswa. Jadi kita punya namanya PPIF, Persatuan Pelajar Indonesia Filipina, yaitu mahasiswa-mahasiswa Indonesia yang belajar di Filipina, ada yang dari tingkat SD, SMP, SMA, dan kemudian sampai perguruan tinggi. Di Filipina memang tidak ada beasiswa khusus yang diperuntukkan kepada mahasiswa luar negeri. Tetapi di Filipina, mahasiswanya yang berkuliah di sekolah negeri, mereka gratis dari kampusnya. Sehingga mereka untuk mendapatkan beasiswa ke luar negeri, mereka lebih senang kalau beasiswa itu adalah hanya short course ataupun hanya sebentar saja. Karena apa? Karena mereka ingin kembali segera ke Filipina dan kemudian melanjutkan kuliahnya. Sehingga ketika pertama kali saya datang di tahun 2017, hanya 2 orang yang berminat mengikuti beasiswa Dharma Siswa. Tetapi ketika 2018 sudah sekitar 20 orang yang bersedia mengikuti beasiswa Dharma Siswa di Indonesia. Mereka rata-rata mengambil bahasa Indonesia dan juga ada yang karawitan, tarian Jawa, dan sebagainya. Dan mayoritas mereka belajar di Yogyakarta. Selain itu, peran strategis dari Atase Pendidikan adalah fasilitasi dan pembinaan SILN. Nah, SILN ini adalah Sekolah Indonesia Luar Negeri. Kami memiliki Sekolah Indonesia Luar Negeri yaitu di Davao. Di Davao sekitar 1,5 jam menggunakan pesawat terbang menuju Davao dari Filipina. Adapun murid-murid di Davao adalah half Indonesia. Artinya mereka orang Indonesia keturunan, entah bapaknya, ibunya, kakeknya, dan sebagainya. Mereka sekolah di sana gratis dan kemudian ada asramanya. Sehingga mereka nanti akan meneruskan, melanjutkan ke Indonesia ataupun bekerja di Mindanao dan kemudian akan semakin cinta kepada Indonesia. Mereka ini sampai saat ini masih belajar di sana, mulai dari SD kelas 1, kemudian sampai dengan SMA kelas 12. Totalnya ada sekitar 100 orang. Dan mereka rata-rata berasal dari ekonomi menengah ke bawah, sehingga sangat terbantukan dengan adanya Sekolah Indonesia Luar Negeri ini. Saya menghimbau kepada kampus-kampus yang akan melakukan magang luar negeri, silahkan magang di Sekolah Indonesia Davao. Kita memiliki fasilitas yang cukup lumayan, artinya kalau seandainya mahasiswa-mahasiswa tersebut mau magang di sana dan kemudian menerima fasilitas apa adanya, maka kita akan sediakan. Saat ini sudah sekitar 3 bulan, ada 15 mahasiswa dari UPI Bandung sedang melakukan magang di SILN Davao. Dan mereka sekarang tidak bisa pulang karena tidak ada pesawat yang memfasilitasi kembali ke Indonesia. Mudah-mudahan di awal Juni ini sudah mulai bisa kembali ke Indonesia. Adapun siswa-siswa SILN ini sejak saya datang 2017 sudah mendapat beasiswa. Artinya berkat usaha mendapatkan beasiswa dari Universitas Lambung Mangkurat, dari IAIN Solo, dari Universitas Piksi Ganesha, kemudian dari universitas yang lainnya. Sehingga mereka 100% bisa ditampung mendapat beasiswa di kampus-kampus di Indonesia. Sebelumnya mereka lulus dari SILN, kebanyakan mereka adalah bekerja karena ketidakmampuan mereka untuk melanjutkan ke perguruan tinggi. Sedangkan CLC dan PKBM kita tidak memiliki. Berikutnya ada KNB. Nah, KNB ini adalah beasiswa bagi negara berkembang. Dan tahun lalu ada 2 orang dari Filipina yang berminat, yaitu mereka sekarang ini sedang mengambil master di UI dan satu lagi master di UNY. Mudah-mudahan kedepannya banyak mahasiswa Filipina yang mau mengambil beasiswa KNB maupun beasiswa Dharmasiswa. Next. Baik, untuk lebih jelasnya, di sini saya akan mempertegas lagi beberapa bentuk kerjasama yang sudah saya lakukan selama 3 tahun menjadi Aktase Pendidikan dan Kebudayaan di Filipina. Perlu saya jelaskan di sini, Filipina memiliki 3 pulau besar. Kalau kita kan punya 5, yaitu Luzon, Visayas, dan Mindanao. 3 pulau besar ini yang paling banyak orang Indonesianya atau keturunan Indonesia adalah di Mindanao, karena mereka kebanyakan adalah perpindahan dari Manado. Dari Manado ke Mindanao itu sangat dekat, sehingga banyak sekali orang-orang Indonesia yang berada di Mindanao. Di sini beberapa bentuk kerjasama antara lain adalah memfasilitasi program pertukaran antar institusi pendidikan dan pelatihan. Jadi banyak sekali kegiatan-kegiatan pertukaran yang dilakukan oleh poltekkes ataupun sekolah-sekolah keperawatan yang mengambil angka kredit di sini atau student exchange dan sebagainya. Pertukaran institusi ini dilakukan setelah melalui MOU. Pada tahun 2013 ada sekitar MOU yang dibuat oleh Adikbud sebelumnya dengan berbagai universitas yang ada di Filipina. Nah, semenjak 2017, 2018, 2019 sampai 2020 saya sudah memfasilitasi sekitar 200 MOU, baik antara universitas dengan universitas maupun antara Kementerian Pendidikan dengan sekolah-sekolah SMA, SMP, SD yang ada di sini. Dan kemudian hampir sebagian besar sudah diimplementasikan. Jadi tidak hanya sebatas tanda tangan saja. Contoh yang paling konkret adalah Sister School. Dari semenjak 2018 sampai dengan saat ini sudah ada sekitar 200 orang guru dan kepala sekolah dari SD, SMP, dan SMA yang datang ke sini. Adapun mereka datang ke sini adalah melakukan benchmarking, melihat seperti apa pendidikan yang ada di Filipina. Baik pendidikan di SD, SMP, SMA, dan kemudian kita melakukan seminar internasional. Dan kemudian mereka melihat secara langsung seperti apa pembelajaran di dalam kelas-kelas yang ada di Filipina. Secara kenyataan, satu kelas di Filipina itu memiliki jumlah siswa yang banyak. Tidak seperti di Indonesia yang dibatasi satu kelas maksimal 35 orang. Tetapi di sini ada yang satu kelas sampai 70 orang. Bagaimana mereka melakukan KBM yang baik dan benar selama berada di dalam kelas ataupun di luar kelas dengan jumlah siswa yang besar tersebut. Sehingga guru-guru tersebut yang datang secara langsung melihat seperti apa KBM yang dilakukan oleh guru-guru. Aktivitas apa yang dilakukan sehingga mereka bisa mengaktifkan siswa walaupun jumlah siswa satu kelasnya sangat banyak sekali. Nah, pengalaman itulah yang mereka bawa ke Indonesia. Dan mereka itu saya undang, bukan berarti saya yang membiayai tiket mereka, tidak. Mereka membiayai tiket mereka sendiri, tetapi selama berada di Filipina semua saya fasilitasi. Mulai dari penginapannya, makannya, kemudian transportnya, dan kemudian seminar dan sebagainya selama 4 hari. Kemudian manfaatnya adalah mereka menyadari bahwa apabila kita mendapatkan murid yang banyak di dalam satu kelas, apa yang harus kita lakukan untuk mengaktifkan siswa? Jadi yang mengkreatifkan adalah gurunya dan membuat anaknya kreatif. Itulah manfaat yang didapatkan oleh guru-guru yang datang ke Filipina. Terakhir, ketika bulan Februari, ada sekitar 30 orang guru dan kepala sekolah dari Jawa Barat datang ke sini selama 4 hari. Berikutnya adalah nomor 2, mendukung program pendidikan, pelatihan, penilaian, penelitian, budaya, dan bahasa. Pengakuan atas pembelajaran sebelumnya. Nah, di sini banyak dilakukan oleh poltekkes ataupun stikes baik swasta maupun negeri. Mereka melakukan MOU dengan sekolah-sekolah keperawatan yang ada di Filipina. Jadi di Filipina ini beda dengan di Indonesia. Kalau di Indonesia masih ada diploma untuk poltekkes atau stikesnya, di Filipina tidak boleh. Mereka harus S1. Kemudian dari pendidikan yang mereka dapatkan di sini, pelatihan-pelatihan tersebut, mereka akan mendapatkan sertifikat yang mempunyai nilai tambah mereka ketika mereka akan bekerja ke luar negeri. Dan kemudian saya juga melakukan pelatihan. Misalnya, saya melakukan pelatihan di Bali, bagaimana caranya para siswa nursing tersebut ketika akan mengikuti ujian NCLEX. NCLEX ini adalah ujian nursing internasional. Pelatihan selama 2 hari atau 3 hari tersebut dengan pembicara dari top rank. Mereka mengajarkan step by step, satu persatu soal yang ada di NCLEX dan bagaimana strategi menjawabnya. Karena banyak sekali lulusan nursing Filipina yang sudah bekerja di luar negeri, baik di Eropa, Amerika, Australia, bahkan juga di negara-negara di Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, dan sebagainya. Dan menurut data yang saya kumpulkan, ternyata nursing yang paling banyak di seluruh dunia adalah nursing yang berasal dari Filipina. Jadi kita bisa belajar mengapa negara-negara banyak menerima nursing dari Filipina. Apa kelebihannya? Nah, inilah yang menjadi daya tarik bagi Indonesia kalau seandainya ingin belajar tentang nursing adalah sangat tepat ke Filipina. Berikutnya,
mohon maaf Bu Lili,
ya,
waktu kurang 5 menit lagi.
Oke, baik, saya akan selesaikan.
Sorry.
Ya, baik, terima kasih. Kemudian juga bahasa, karena kemarin guru dari BIPA, Bahasa Indonesia Penutur Asing, di bulan Mei, karena keadaan COVID seperti ini, tanggal 14 mereka kembali, maka mulai dari tanggal 28 Mei saya buka Bahasa Indonesia Penutur Asing secara online. Dan saat ini muridnya sudah ada 450 orang. Bahkan mereka belajar ada yang sampai malam, mulai dari jam 8 sampai jam 11 malam. Itu menunjukkan bagaimana orang Filipina sangat tertarik untuk belajar bahasa Indonesia karena mereka wajib di sini ada di dalam mata pelajaran 5 bahasa lainnya. Kemudian memfasilitasi pertukaran guru, pelajar, mahasiswa, short course, student exchange, sister school, visit school, dan magang. Oke. Bagi anak-anak ibu atau mahasiswa-mahasiswa yang mau magang ke KBRI Manila, silakan membuat surat pernyataan. Persyaratannya mudah, yaitu surat dari atasan langsung, CV, transkrip nilai, dan kemudian berapa lama akan magang. 1 bulan, 2 bulan, tergantung dari kampusnya. Dan kemudian akan magang 1 bulan lamanya misalnya di KBRI Manila. Semua fasilitas dari mahasiswa masing-masing. KBRI tidak memberikan fasilitas penginapan, uang, dan sebagainya. Berikutnya, magang ini tidak ada seleksi, wawancara, bahasa Inggris, dan seterusnya. Karena kita membuka seluas-luasnya pengalaman bagi mahasiswa untuk magang di KBRI, karena merupakan kewajiban dari kampus masing-masing. Kemudian, pertukaran publikasi, pendidikan, dan jurnal pendidikan. Dan terakhir, memfasilitasi pertukaran buku referensi, hasil penelitian, materi pembelajaran, pameran pendidikan, university fair, simposium, dan seminar-seminar internasional. Baik, di sini saya next slide-nya.
Slide, please.
Di sini ada saya tayangkan Dharma Siswa Scholarship yang ada di seluruh Indonesia. Tinggal memasukkan untuk orang-orang Filipina, memasukkan lamarannya ke KBRI dan kemudian akan diseleksi langsung oleh saya. Mungkin itu saja. Terima kasih. Next.
Next.
Selanjutnya,
Next slide.
ya next ya. Terima kasih maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Selamat pagi.
Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Lily, for the inspiring session, especially how to bridging the Indonesian and the Philippines embassy, especially during the training, teachers training, maybe internship, and pursuing the study in the Philippines. Especially the University of the Philippines is ranking number 1 in the THE. That's right, Professor Arminda Santiago, especially the College of Masscom. We have our Professor Arminda Santiago as the second speakers, the Dean of the College of Mass Communication. The Professor Arminda Santiago is a faculty member of the College of the Masscom, where she current the Dean. She also affiliate a faculty member of the Faculty and Information and Communication Studies in the Doctor Communication Program in the University of the Philippines Open University, head of the production of the TVUP, the Internet Television Station of the University of the Philippines System. The Professor Santiago also have experience, especially as a visiting professor in the University Utara Malaysia, and Professor Santiago has a PhD communication degree from the University of the Philippines in the 2006, MA in the radio and television film from the University of North Texas, USA. And Professor Santiago, time is yours. Magandang tanghali po.
Hello. I'm sorry for a very long intro, but because I've been working at UP for 35 years now.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why it's very. But thank you for inviting me over, and this is a very how do you say this? This is a very important gathering to talk about research and opportunities and challenges in research and in collaboration. So I don't have a PowerPoint, but I will share with you my thoughts. Actually, to me, one of the most fascinating activities in academic life is doing and writing research. Although some of you may think that I am weird, but doing research unfolds so many things for us. And this is important. We always have to have a curious mind. To me, research makes me see the world and the everyday phenomena around me in a childlike manner. I'm given a childlike mind, and I'm given a childlike eyes. And to many students, yes, research is tedious and time-consuming, but just have an open mind and it can be seen and experienced in a most positive way. And it is like an adventure into discovering or finding out things, how things work, how people think, how people live, why do we have many ways of going through our lives, and many more. It becomes tedious because research is understood to be systematic, formal, and rigorous. But then we have to look at research as a creative and systematic work undertaken to increase the stock of knowledge. Remember that even as an academic institution, even as a country, we have to always have creativity, innovation, and imagination in mind. And opportunities for research and collaboration is boundless. If you really think about it, there are many organizations that offer. They have calls for research proposals. There are invitations for collaborations, both local and international. And but then the basic question is, what do you want to study? One of the first challenges in entering into any collaborative work, especially with research, is, does it coincide with your own personal passions or personal preferences that you want to study? Okay, what is the topic or the subject matter of the research? And this is expressed in a few words or a phrase, and it becomes the central idea to learn about or to explore. And this becomes a challenge, mainly because we should have a degree. Some professors would say that we should have to have a degree of familiarity on what we want to study. Sometimes when we choose a topic to research, most of the time we have to ask ourselves, am I familiar with this? Do I have the respondents that I can get? But if you're not familiar, then do I need time to immerse on this topic? And we've all gone through this when we were in university. So, and then, of course, okay, another challenge is the time. Do I have the time to devote to this? Even if it is, let's say, an invitation to collaborate or to do a research, like a call for a research proposal. Do I have time to do this? And what would be the financial, would there be financial burden on me? Of course, in many instances, the financial aspect is always the one that would, well, not always, but most of the time, could dictate what the breadth of the research should be, because there is what you call a time frame that we have to follow. However, if you're not talking about what your interests are, I have met many scholars and intellectuals who do research because of passion. And passion is this intense feeling of enthusiasm. And like in my case, I am very passionate on knowing a lot about women in film, in whatever aspect of where women are involved in the film industry, and wherever this film industry is. Is it in the Philippines or is it abroad? And because of this passion, I embarked on a research on my own. I do little studies of my own. Yeah, that's why maybe people think that I am weird. Because when I wonder about certain things, I do my literature review. Even if there are times when I do not pursue it as a full-blown research, but I use my review of related literature for my teaching and for sharing with others. In the international arena, there are many organizations that have calls for research proposals and collaborations. However, the studies that they look for, of course, depends on their organization's focus. And this becomes a challenge too, okay, to any researcher or to anyone who wants to do a study. Okay, so you have to learn about the organization that has a call for such proposals. And of course, you have to be patient enough to search the web or writing to organizations who would, and who knows, you may stumble upon an organization that you could submit a proposal to. Research proposal writing is another challenge when it comes to this arena, because not everybody, okay, has this motivation to write a research proposal. I'm sure many times just writing the introduction or the background rationale for a proposal really takes time, and we have to squeeze our brains to just even start with a first line. So writing the proposals, okay, would be a challenge. But right now, one of the main challenges, especially that we face here in the University of the Philippines in Diliman, are what we call research ethical standards. And these are required to be disclosed. And there are organizations that require that your research must pass an accreditation or another organization on ethics in the Philippines. Here, we have the Department of Science and Technology. It has a Research Ethics Committee, and the National Research Ethics Committee is known as the Philippine Health Research Ethics Board. If we are to submit a research proposal to the Department of Science and Technology and its other organizations there, because under the DOST, like we have the National Research Council of the Philippines, where I am a regular member. And when we submit research proposals, our proposals have to go through this so-called PHREB, the Philippine Health Research Ethics Board. But it poses a problem to social science research and other kinds of research, like for instance, research in the arts and humanities cluster, cultural research, and artistic research, because this board, PHREB, uses positivist empirical procedures. So it will look for the scientific aspect in your proposal. Maybe there are social science researches that could pass this, because many times in social science, we also do quantitative and qualitative research that wherein it's easy to come up with your research scientific protocols. But what of artistic research? What of arts and humanities, which uses most of the time critical research designs? And in critical research, it's more talking about ideological aspects of a certain phenomena. And there is really no established, how do you say this, protocol that you could call scientific. Many times, if it's an ideological study, then even the researcher's ideological stance can affect the research. And most of the time in critical research, it is a reader-text relationship with what you are studying. So if a very empirical positivist person will study your proposal, it's sure not to be approved. So because of this, the Arts and Humanities Academic Cluster of UP Diliman, and the College of Mass Comm is a member of the cluster, we have embarked on drafting research protocols and accreditation processes for the arts and humanities, social sciences, and cultural research. And we look at the other research ethical protocols of other universities like Ateneo de Manila and also De La Salle University, leading universities here, and we collaborate with them. However, we also have the Philippine Social Science Council. I was hoping that my friend who's the executive director of the Social Science Council could be here, but I don't know, I haven't seen her name in the participants list. But she's the executive director, and the PSSC has a social science research ethical protocol. However, it is not an accrediting body, especially when we do nationwide research. So the PSSC is also getting the collaboration of the College of Mass Communication, because as you all know, communication straddles on two disciplines, social science and arts and humanities. So we are right now doing that to address that kind of a problem. Tell me if I'm taking long, Daniel. Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, I hope you're still with me.
Yeah, still.
Yeah.
Still,
Okay.
Ma'am Din.
So my perspective and mindset and attitude on and about research, because I always find it fascinating, is what honed me throughout my 35 years of working with academe and here in this academic institution, UP Diliman. And it has helped me extensively when I was engaged as a visiting associate professor at the University Utara, Malaysia in 2014. And for 2 years, I was there. I taught at the School of Multimedia Technology and Communication, SMMTC, and in their Bachelor of Creative Industry Management in Film. Sometime in 2012, I received an email and asking me for my vitae. But of course, you know, as anybody who's careful with the internet, so I had to verify if UUM was a legitimate school that existed. So my assistant made overseas call, and indeed, yes. And because I didn't know the dean, so, and then later, they wanted to engage me as a visiting professor because somehow they learned the extent of my work here in UP Diliman. So my expertise is in media and film research and film and multimedia production and management. So I handled courses in film history and criticism, film directing, cinematography, creative and critical thinking, to mention a few there at UUM. And actually, UUM is the management university in Malaysia. That's how I understood it when I went there. And the curriculum of the Bachelor of Creative Industry Management was more focused on the management aspect. And I was engaged to help them to put in the creative aspect. And so I helped them improve their syllabus, their syllabi, and to look for references that could provide the artistic aspect. And then I also suggested strongly that the school should invest in having a film library, even if it is DVD, because the only way to teach or for a student to see the creative side is to watch films. So I also donated to them some films that we have here, because here in the College of Mass Comm, the Bachelor of Arts in Film program, we always require a production thesis. So I also shared to them how we did the protocols for the production thesis. And they also gave me assignments such as supervising MA and PhD thesis students. At that time in 2014, there were 12 students who were already in their senior year. And I was given the opportunity to supervise their thesis. So, and the students were very open, and they welcomed that they have a Filipino professor. So, and also I helped the UUM in organizing the first Asian indie film festival and competition. So in 2014. And I was part of the sponsorship committee, then the conceptualizing committee, and the formulation of the rubrics for the competition. So I think right now, from 2014, they call it the AYIF, the Asian Youth Indie Film Festival. It's already on its 6th year this year. Okay. Being in a foreign country, well, actually, I've been sent to many countries. I lived in Japan because I was I had a fellowship there for audiovisual technology. Then I lived in US. But you know, being in a foreign country and hearing a different language from my own, this was the first challenge that I had. It was on a cultural level. And also, I had to, well, actually, I had to, you know, observe and study the everyday ways of Malaysians. Like now I learned that, well, I learned when I was there that, like, you know, in Philippines, we have beso. We kiss, but, you know, just touch the cheek to cheek when we greet each other. And here, we only do it once. But in Malaysia, I learned there that, so every time I see a Malaysian, I do the right cheek, left cheek. I think it's 3 times. And then I clasp my hands and put it on my heart. Because I also learned that this is a gesture of sincerity. And it was not difficult to learn about it, because, you know, sincerity is something that's very important for me personally. Then I also had to learn, you know, it's something like I did not think about research first. I had to learn the academic system, because UP is predominantly US education system. In Malaysia, it's predominantly British. Okay, correct me if I am wrong. And I also had to. I was not good in Excel, but I had to learn Excel because I had to produce matrices before the semester starts. I had to do a work schema for my courses, and I have to do this also another schematic diagram to align the objectives of the program with my course objectives and with the school's objectives, because these are things that we never did here in UP. And then I had to learn how going through the procedure of the vetting of final exams. So a committee will listen and look at the final exam that I write or I wrote. At first, I was a bit hesitant, and I questioned my program coordinator, because I said, why will non-film experts look at my exam? And I had to explain that, you know, in UP, we have academic freedom. And of course, it's alien to UUM. And so, but then with that question, actually I learned as I went through it that, you know, they would look at your grammatical structure, and then, but there are times when they looked at the course objectives, and I have a question that did not align with that, so I have to justify why I had to put it. So those are some things that are not really research related. After more than a month, that's the time I acclimatized myself to my new academic system and new academic organization. And that's the time that I thought about what research I should do. Because if you're a visiting professor, you have to also have, it's one of the key indicators, performance indicators, the KPI, that you should have research. So, because here in the Philippines, I've been studying women film directors in mainstream Philippine industry. So I said to myself, I want to explore Malaysian women film directors, because Malaysia has a film industry that is thriving at the time. And also, the Philippine film industry shares a character with Malaysian film industry as a male-dominated industry. Okay, so I wondered how women film directors fared. And also, I wanted to find out what the discourse of women, Malaysian women, was, you know, in their film industry. So the first film that I saw, the first Malaysian film that I saw, but of course, because language is really a challenge, so I could only access Malaysian films with English subtitles. Okay? Or sometimes I have my friend, my Malaysian friend, who would always sit beside me patiently because she's interested also in film. And, you know, she would be my translator as we watch the film. The first film that I saw was by Yasmin Ahmad, and she's critically acclaimed and popular female film director in Malaysia. And the film that I saw was Sepet, and it was released in 2004. And it's a love story between a Chinese boy and a Malay girl. And this is a situation that is out of the ordinary in Malaysia. Okay,
sorry po.
I have time na, no? So anyway, it's like that, okay? So, but this research, okay, unfortunately, UUM cannot fund me because I'm a visiting professor and I have to look for somebody who is Malaysian to be with me. But at the time, all the Malaysian co-faculty that I have their own researches. So anyway, I asked for UP for funding. So I did that. And then I did not choose to publish my research in Malaysia. I brought it home because I wanted to expand it to become a book. So, you know, if you have childlike wonder, you know, then, and of course, you have that passion, then why not proceed with your research? Okay? And collaboration, okay, depends also on the things that you have to comply with. But you know, my last, okay,
okay po.
salvo. The pandemic, while it destroyed, well, not really destroyed, but put on hold many economies, even our countries, it produces an exciting research field. Okay? The pandemic is something that we should look at and we should study, especially when we talk about the socio-cultural discourses, the economic discourses, okay, and also wonder why, despite what our governments say, there are still many who defy government. So this is something that we should look into and try to understand why. And, you know, and to me, this is exciting time, even if the pandemic quarantines us, you know, this is an exciting time to look into this. Anyway, like in the Philippines, non-COVID related activities are vetoed by our government. But if it is COVID related, it will fund your research. So like now, we're looking into this. So, you know, so you take the opportunity in our respective countries, especially in ASEAN. Enough of the Western world. Let them talk about their problems. Okay? Let them complain about their problems. But we need to focus on ASEAN. And this is an exciting time to do it. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share.
Okay. Thank you po. Salamat po for the very meaningful inspiration, story, and experience during your visitings in UUM in Malaysia, especially how to discussing about the research ethic in the social science, because many research now is really scientists, especially during the COVID-19. People are really thinking, oh, the social science not more important. Now it's more the epidemiology or the disease. Okay. For the third speakers, we have the speakers from the Malaysia. And before to the third speakers, I want to say thank you for coming, Bapa Aminullah, the Secgen of the P2B, who really have many grants of the writing books, very successful writers. Thank you for joining us, Bapa Aminullah. And for during this, to continue these webinars, the third speaker, Associate Professor Noor Hassana Abdullah from the Faculty of the Technology Management and Business, University Tun Hussein On, Malaysia. The Professor Noor Hassana will speak about the strategy of the international collaboration for the writing in the book. The Professor Noor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon here, but I think it's still morning over there. Thank you, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you. Okay, Professor Noor, time is yours.
All right. Assalamualaikum, everybody, and a very good, I'm not sure what is the time in Philippines for Prof. Santiago, but I'm just saying that a good morning and good afternoon, yeah? So basically,
it's lunchtime.
It's lunchtime, isn't it? So I'm just going to go a little bit quicker for the fact that we have a lot of participants inside here, about 300 of them, and then I believe that extending webinar more than 2 hours or more than 1.5 hours is very taxing for the participants, for the fact that our attention span is not so the older we are, our attention span become a little bit shorter, you see. So that's why I would like to go a little bit quicker, but at the same time, hopefully everybody will be able to understand and will be able to appreciate the sharing that I have today. So basically, in UTHM, I'm the Deputy Dean for Publication, Development, and also Research. Yeah. So basically, we have a strategy in UTHM in order to actually boost the publications of our books. Yeah. So what I'm going to share with the participants today is how can we actually strategize on how to improve the publication, especially books. Yeah. This, when we talk about books, most people right now, they are not keen to the idea of book publication. Yeah. Why? Because books sometimes take more time. Take more time, and the process of publication for books usually can be very tedious for certain people. However, I believe that if we are doing it correctly, we can actually publish within a year. In fact, I have several instances in our faculty whereby we basically be able to actually start the production of our book from the beginning to the end within 3 months. Yeah, so that's basically a very tall order. But Alhamdulillah, I got a very good editor, very good editor, and a very hardworking team members, the what we call it, the team of authors that contributing to the book, so that we be able to actually publish within 3 months. Okay, so basically, why not, Mr. Daniel, you share my first slide, or you can skip the first slide, go to the second slide, because the first slide is only the introduction, right?
Okay, okay.
PowerPoint.
The slide?
Yeah, the slide. Or can I share with mine, or if you want to control it over there?
The second
Right.
slide?
The second one. Yeah. All right. So basically, when we talk about book publication, we need to understand that there are many types of books. Yeah. Textbooks, everybody knows about textbook. This one are usually written by one or two authors that are expert in the field. We also have research book. This one that I think Prof. Santiago have been talking about. Dr. Lily also have talked about this research book. Yeah. The third one is thesis turned into book. Right. This one is very popular among those who just graduated from their PhD. Once they graduated from their PhD, rather than put their thesis aside and leave they turn their thesis into a book. This is another type of book. And then we have the last type of book, that is book chapters. All right, book chapters are basically a collection of chapters inside a book that are written by several authors. Okay, so for collaboration, especially if it is collaboration at international level or at national level, this is one of the most suitable type of academic book that can be used as a collaboration effort. Book chapters, yeah. So book chapters, yeah, the content very much linked with the theme of the book. And this theme of the book, you need to actually come out with a theme. Like for example, COVID, but the book chapter will talk about different aspect of COVID as from the perspective of creative industry, from the perspective of management, from the perspective of those in medical, from the perspective of those in engineering. So it can be done in that way. So that's what we call it interdisciplinary. Yeah. So we can actually have one team and everybody is contributing based on the theme from different perspective. Okay. So that is one of the way that we can do that. And then the second issue is always about the publisher. Publisher have significant implication to the coverage of your book. If you are publishing using the in-house university publication unit, it depends on their strategy. If your university have publication office and the publication office are very good in strategy and marketing, blah, blah, blah. So, publication should be something that you can actually choose. Okay, so it depends. In my in UTHM, our publication unit is very hardworking, is very dynamic. So basically, if we give them certain tasks, they can actually respond very well. So and then because in-house, so the publication, the publisher, so the authors from the same university are very good. So it depends on how you look at it. International publisher like Springer, like Elsevier, they also can publish your book. You can actually apply, okay? You can actually apply to this Springer. In fact, Emerald, they have also. So you can actually apply for book publication using this international publisher. And then of course, we also have profit-oriented publisher. Profit-oriented publisher, Pearson, McGraw-Hill, they are focusing more on textbook, but there are other profit-oriented publisher. Yeah. Why? Because they are profit-oriented. You need to actually investigate further in terms of their position. So these are the things that need to be need to be taken care of or need to be considered, yeah, because these are going to actually affect job application rights.
Next, please.
Yeah, next slide, please.
Next slide.
Yeah, sure. Okay. The selection of publisher have very significant implication in terms of the legal issue. So when we talk about publishing book, one of the most critical or one of the most controversial issue will be the legal issue. So that's why selection of the publisher that I've said earlier is very important, because if you choose the wrong publisher, they will not protect of the book. Okay, in terms of the copyright, in terms of the contract, negligent publication, things like that, they won't advise you accordingly. So that's why it's important to actually choose the right publisher. In my perspective, all right, for enhancing the quality and also the visibility of university, I always actually advise for those university who just would like to start or to boost the image of their publisher, their in-house university publisher, to actually use the university publisher. Okay, these are going to actually improve the visibility of the university, all right, and also at the same time you help the university in publishing your book. Okay, so these are some of the legal issues that need to be the types of publication. We talk about book. Now the trend, you have ebooks, isn't it? But ebook is not is now already branch out to audiobook. Now people, they don't have time to actually read. All right, they would like to listen. So some of the book are already you can actually have them converted into audiobook. So these are different types of publication that you can consider when you would like to do your publication. All right, so next slide. All right, now this is one of the most important things, yeah? When we talk about publication of books, high-performing team of authors are very, very important. I know we like people that we think they are very nice. We think that they are our friend. We know them for many, many years. Remember this. When we talk about publication, we talk about performance, right? Select high-performing individuals who can actually comply with your deadline. Talk to them first, all right? If they do not be able to actually comply with your deadline, then all right? And authors that can be able to, that are highly independent and be able to work well with deadlines are very critical. So when you ask me about this, why I have these 3 months, yeah, we managed to actually publish a book in 3 months from the beginning till the end, is because we have this a very good high-performing team of authors. Okay, who be able to actually, when we said correction, they do the correction. When we said you have to do this correction, 3 days, they will be able to actually get the correction in 3 days. I know it sounds crazy. People don't like it. That's why I said when you have your team of authors, you do your own way. So if you have, like I have another team whereby we have been working with that particular book 1 year and nothing come out. So it depends on how you want it, right? So there are many instances, or there are many many things that you can actually work with, and it all depends on you. So both because of the fact that book usually old news, yeah. People always say that books is always old news. When we want to actually do literature review, when we want to do referencing, we usually use journal. We don't use books. That is why it is critical to actually, when you write your book, you have to write it within 1 year and have it published in 1 year. If you have, then it is not going to be that obsolete, yeah. The expiry date you can actually stretch a bit. Okay, so that is how I look at it, yeah. And then copy editing is very important, especially when you have many authors in one book. I think Prof. Santiago will be very good in commenting about this, because when you have different authors, you have different way of writing. You have the different style, yeah, and then if you want to make it a good book, all these stuff need to be actually standardized to a certain extent. You cannot have different types of writing for different chapters. It would not look good overall. So these are the things that usually copy editing can actually help the author to make sure the flow are the same. Then from one chapter to another chapter, there is a storyline that everybody can follow, so that the whole book actually enriching the experience of the reader as a whole, rather than at separate theme. Yeah, that is how I believe it's supposed to be done. Next.
Sorry, Professor Noor.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's 5 minutes more.
Yeah, it's okay. I think this is the last slide, the last one. So don't worry. All right. So the last one will be. It's not moving, Mr. Daniel. This is the last slide. All right. So this is the last slide. It's actually the book content and design. Yeah, whereby I always encourage authors to actually include case studies, especially if you are from different discipline. So case study are very way of actually integrating all the sub themes that you have from different perspective, and then the design of the book must be very, very appealing, because first impression always matter. Yeah. And then autobibliography is a must to engage the readers and to inform the readers that the one that actually are those experts in their field. And this is the most important marketing strategy. When we want to write a book, at the end of the day, we want the book to be not to be sold, yeah, but to be. So we need to make sure. That's why when we have from different university collaboration, what we call it strategy, you need to make sure that the text or that the book that you've written can supplement your book that you are using for your classes. So such things are going to use in the process of and then Dr. Lily is talking about how you actually use the books publication to actually exchange with those from different countries. That is also good. I think many universities now, they go for MOA, okay, MOU. You can use the book as a gift rather than giving them something else. You can use the book as a token of gratitude or token of and then you have a very big heart. Make your book open access so everybody can actually access your book, so they can cite your book. So that is one of the things that I think more suitable for those people who are interested in writing books. So I think that's it, Mr. Daniel. I think I actually I have finished my time limit.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, thank you, the Associate Professor Nur Abdullah, for the very inspiring session about the books and how the publishings and how to bridgings with the publishers and what is the really happens during the writing the books. And we continue with the Q&A session. The first question is coming from the Yulifa Bakar. It's maybe for all the speakers, the step-by-step how to conduct the research in the Philippines and Malaysia. Maybe for the first sessions to be the Ibu Laili, the step-by-step to be prepared to research in the Philippines. Ibu?
Untuk melakukan penelitian step by step di Filipina, pertanyaannya begitu?
Betul.
Ya, baik, untuk melakukan penelitian step by step di Filipina, pertama sekali adalah kerjasama dengan universitas mana untuk melakukan penelitiannya. Setelah itu melakukan MOU, yaitu antara universitas yang ada di Filipina dan yang di Indonesia. Setelah itu dilanjutkan dengan MOA, ya. Setelah dilakukan MOA, maka setelah itu mulai dibahas seperti apa, di mana pertemuannya, dan bagaimana penulisannya. Kalau seandainya akan dilakukan di Filipina, kapan dan di mana dan bagaimana bentuknya, dan kalau akan dilakukan di Filipina seperti apa dan bagaimana bentuknya. Nah, itu yang penulisannya. Di Filipina banyak sekali jurnal-jurnal internasional yang sudah diakreditasi, sehingga kalau seandainya para peneliti di Indonesia akan menulis di jurnal-jurnal Filipina akan mendapat peluang yang banyak. Dengan catatan sudah melakukan kerjasama dengan universitas-universitas terkait. Jadi tujuan utama adalah sebelum melakukan penelitian, jajaki dahulu universitas mana yang akan dilakukan kerjasamanya. Karena di Filipina itu sama dengan di Indonesia, kalau universitas negeri dianya adalah bagus semuanya. Kemudian kalau di swasta mereka ada yang akreditasi A atau B atau C. Nah, ini kita harus hati-hati. Jadi artinya lebih baik melakukan kerjasamanya dengan universitas negeri yang sudah jelas dia memiliki jurnal internasional terakreditasi. Mungkin itu saja.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Lili. Especially you mentioned about the international recognized international journal. The Professor Santiago, editor-in-chief, the Plaridel Journal, the Scopus Index Journal. And how about the Professor Santiago, step by step to prepare research in the UP, Professor Santiago?
Okay. In UP, if it is from university outside of the Philippines, and also university inside the Philippines, we also have to go through what we call the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, and MOA later for the Memorandum of Agreement. MOU is a general thing. So it just states there that we will do research collaboration with you, do some trainings, etc. But the Memorandum of Agreement has the details. You know, it's like what is expected from the University of the Philippines, what is expected from the other university, and the MOU and the MOA are signed by the chancellor. So it is a chancellor to chancellor communication. And there are times, like for instance, for UUM, because at that time in 2014, it was their first time to collaborate with the UP Diliman. So we have the template for the MOU and MOA. So we send it to them, and then they edit it, they revise, and then they send it to us, and then it goes through the Vice President for Legal Affairs for scrutiny, and then when it is okay with the VP for legal, then we finalize the MOU or MOA, and then it depends on the institutions. Many times the signing of these documents can be just made through courier. So we send it to the university and then they send it back. But for instance, like for the case of UUM, because they wanted to see the UP Diliman campus, so their vice chancellor and the dean of SMMTC with 10 Malaysian students, they flew. They went here. So that's how it is. But there are also research arrangements that it goes through the embassies, especially if it is national in scope. So I've had a chance to work on a research from UK. So UK wrote to the University of the Philippines system, and the memorandum of agreement was signed president to president. So, but I'm not very familiar with that kind of level. But I've had some work with national level MOAs, and we did the research with them. So we did there was collaboration for research from Guangxi University and Fudan University in Shanghai last year. All they did was to write the letter of intent and then to attach the nature of the collaboration. So because they wanted to have Filipino correspondents for their research. So that one was done on a university to university level. No need to go through the embassies. So that's how it is.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Prof. Santiago. And how about in Malaysia, Professor Nur Abdullah? Hello, Professor Nur. Please unmute Professor Nur.
Hi. Okay. In Malaysia, basically we encourage researcher from various university for our grant application. So, and then we don't have to go through the embassy, or we don't have to go through anything. So basically, if you have interest, all right, and you can connect with people who are researcher from Malaysia, and then they are interested to actually work with the grant and become the grant member. But the thing is that the person from Malaysia must be the head of the grant. That's it. If you are the member, it's not a problem. Okay, so the member can come from international university all over the world. It's not a problem. In fact, the chances of your grant to be selected, if you have international participants or international researcher involved, will be higher compared to if you have only local researcher. So that is how because we believe that the quality of research from international perspective has better weightage in a Scopus Journals publication, and also we be able to actually enhance the visibility of each university who participated in the research. That is how Malaysia are looking at it. So no problem so far, except for certain grant, internal grant, things like that. But most of the time, we actually promoting for international grant collaboration in Malaysia. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Professor Noor, for the inspired how to initiate the research in the Malaysia. And the next question is about the medicals, especially to all the speakers about how to continue, especially in the Manila nursing PhD, and especially how to facilitate the research. Sorry, please mute. Yeah. how to facilitate all the research related about the medicals, especially the blood transfusion or maybe nursing, midwifery in Philippines and Malaysia. It is any special case or any special requirements? Maybe I will ask to Prof. Santiago. How about in the UP? Maybe in UP Manila. Is this right?
Yes, actually medical research is UP Manila because that is where the UP Philippine General Hospital is. And I'm not
in Malate.
In Taft Avenue.
Yeah.
So I'm not very familiar with their procedures, but of course, the first thing that should be done is the letter of intent addressed to either the Chancellor of UP Manila, which is Dr. Menchit Padilla, Carmencita Padilla, the Chancellor, or it's directed to the particular department. So if it is research on public health, then they have the Dean for the School of Public Health of UP Manila. Then if it is nursing, then it is addressed to nursing and so on. No? But the first thing is the intent, and then this will be studied by a committee because like even in UP Diliman, all the research intents are studied, and then there's communication that goes on with the proponent and maybe UP Manila. But when it comes to medical research, I know for a fact that UP Manila requires the high research ethical standards, and it might go through to the Philippine Health Ethics Board for further approval, because in medical research, of course, it's a very sensitive thing.
Correct.
Especially if you have to extract blood, etc. Things like that. So but I can communicate with Chancellor Padilla and then ask her for the details, and then I can email it to you, Mr. Daniel.
Okay, thank you for the facility. Okay, thank you for the information from the Philippines, especially from the UP. It should be conducted with the UP Manila, because the UP Manila is a special for the medical school in the Philippines. And how about in Malaysia, Professor Nur Abdullah?
Right. All right. So basically, for medical research in Malaysia, we have actually a very strict consideration or very strict ethical board. So you have to go through Ministry of Medical, the Ministry of Health, in order for you to get approval. In fact, even though it is on management related research grant. I have actually one of my students doing actually hospital information system, and in order for her to get approval for the research, she have to actually waited for many months and to get the approval, because there are several boards that she have to go through to get the approval. So basically, if you were to apply for medical research grant, it is very important to actually attach with certain hospital university in Malaysia, because in Malaysia we have university hospital, and this university hospital, they are the frontliner for the medical research. And also there are certain there are always a good way of having one of the doctors to be your members in your research team. That is how you can actually get the approval speed up a bit. Okay, so you use the doctor as a principal investigator and you become the member, the chances for your approval, your grant to get approval is higher. So that is how we strategize. So we need to actually be very strategic in determining what we want, who we should involve with or engage with in order to get certain grant. So and then it is very important to basically look into several variables on what you are trying to actually study. That will be my point from Malaysia view about research collaboration in medical field. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Associate Professor Noor. And how about in Indonesia Embassy in Manila, especially the Philippines is really popular in Indonesia for the nursings, to continue the nursing and how to conduct the research, especially in medical in the Philippines, the Ibu Laili. Please unmute.
Ya, oke. Baik, terima kasih for especially for nursing. It is a lot of activity. For example, not only they are just coming here and then attending a class, and then we have every school, every university here, they have pelatihan-pelatihan, just only not only in the class, but termasuk juga di puskesmas. Jadi dia punya pelatihan sampai dengan puskesmas dia fasilitasin. Tetapi untuk sampai kepada pelatihan dan kemudian dapat angka kredit dan kemudian bagaimana student exchange dan sebagainya, itu adalah setelah mereka melakukan MOU antar universitas. Contohnya saat ini ada sekitar 15 mahasiswa dari Surabaya, kemudian dari mana lagi ya, dari Kalimantan juga ada yang sedang exchange selama 3 bulan di Tugigarau. Tugigarau itu sekitar 12 jam dari Filipina, tapi juga ada pesawat ke sana. Nah, di sana dia juga menyediakan fasilitas kalau akan mengikuti ujian NCLEX di sana bisa menggunakan bahasa Indonesia. Jadi karena kita kesulitannya adalah bahasa Inggris, dia menyediakan bahasa Indonesia dengan sedikit dana tambahan karena diterjemahkan ke dalam bahasa Indonesia. Akan tetapi sampai saat ini saya sudah tawarkan ke beberapa poltekkes, universitas, tikes dan seterusnya, belum ada yang bersedia menerima tantangan saya ini, yaitu mengambil ujian NCLEX yang memang sulit dan kemudian menggunakan bahasa Indonesia. Karena kalau di Tugigarau, Universitas St. Paul Tugigarau itu dia bukan di bawah Amerika, dia di bawah Inggris. Jadi artinya ujian NCLEX-nya di bawah Inggris sehingga bisa untuk diterjemahkan ke dalam bahasa Indonesia. Dan kalau seandainya ada mengambil pelatihan ataupun ya istilahnya tambahan angka kredit di sana, dia ada fasilitas asrama yang cukup bagus seperti hotel seperti itu dan harganya sangat murah karena memang itu adalah fasilitas dari kampus. Nah, sampai saat ini banyak juga kampus-kampus yang menyediakan fasilitas-fasilitas yang memadai tergantung kerjasamanya. Jadi seperti contohnya Tugigarau itu kerjasama dengan Universitas Keperawatan di Surabaya. Nah, nanti mereka akan melakukan pelatihan di Surabaya selama 6 bulan juga yang sama. Demikian juga seperti yang dilakukan oleh Universitas atau ITEKes Bali dengan Universitas Keperawatan yang ada di Baguio. Nah, Baguio itu sekitar 7-8 jam dari Filipina. Nah, Baguio itu adalah universitas yang membuat kurikulum keperawatan seluruh Filipina. Nah, dia adalah kalau kita mungkin kurikulumnya berbeda-beda antara setiap kampus. Saya sudah bandingkan seluruh kampus keperawatan yang ada di Indonesia semua berbeda. Kalau di Filipina dia ada satu dan itu yang membuat adalah di kampus di universitas di Baguio itu. Nah, mereka sudah melakukan pertukaran. Jadi mahasiswa ITEKES Bali sudah 6 bulan berada di St. Paul dan kemudian St. Paul itu akan melakukan pelatihan di Bali. Mungkin itu yang perlu dilakukan. Jadi yang paling utama, yang paling penting pertama kali adalah perlu adanya MOU. Bagaimana implementasinya, seperti apa implementasinya, dan seterusnya. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Lily, for the very comparative and very detail about the research about medical in the Philippines. And this is the end of the sessions. Thank you for all the speakers, Ibu Lily, Prof. Santiago, and Prof. Nur Abdullah. Have a nice day, and bye-bye. We will wait you for the next events.
Thank you. Terima kasih.
Maraming salamat po.
Mungkin kita foto bersama, Pak.
Guys,
Oke.
Foto bersama.
Oke.
Thank you.
Kita dari sana.
Saya foto
Thank
ya.
you.
Video ya. Video ya, video ya.
Bye-bye.
Kok video, sorry. Sebentar. Saya foto dulu ya. Oke, satu. Cheers ya. Cheers ya. 1, 2. Oke, more. Oke, wait. For this certificate. Oke. Wait. Kita ada 15 page, 15 page. Because almost 400 inside.
wow.
Okay.
Totally, we have 500 participants. In the Zoom is about the 350 plus, and in YouTube about the 170 plus. It's a really huge numbers.
Yes, congratulations.
Besok diumumkan, dan besok kita ada webinar dengan BSN juga. Kita bicara mengenai mutu perguruan tinggi internasional. Ya, itu aja sih Mas Ian.
Yeah,
besok jam 1.
Tomorrow is 1 p.m. We have a next webinar series about the national standard of the accreditation. You can sign into the YouTubes, and also you can register via the links. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po. Thank you. See you. Maraming salamat po. Bye-bye.
Terima kasih.